Hey, Young Repub crew. This is Mike and Ben with the Young Repubs, and we have a special guest with us, Uliti Fangupo, or AKA Poe. So, kind
What?
of tell us about yourself, Poe. Just kind of go into about your political background, I guess. Like one thing I really liked about you is you were an OG MAGA supporter, and you yeah. So just go into your
Yeah,
political background.
it's funny because this back when Trump was running, I was in a business. I was in a business meeting in Las Vegas, and one of the guys made fun of him. It's like, oh, we have a clown running for trying to be a president, and he's like this Trump guy. And then I thought about that, and I was like, I know Trump. I used to have a tie that had Trump on it. and then and then I looked up Trump, and honestly, I always root for the underdog, always, just
Mhm.
because it's a much more interesting story. And then if they win, it's just fun more. So at first, I supported him just because he was the underdog, and when people were making fun of him and all of that, I was like, well, I'm gonna just go for him and let's just do this. But then as I was listening to President Trump, I started realizing that he had some techniques that I think a lot of people were missing, and techniques in terms of persuasion. And the first one that I noticed, which was interesting because I started following other persuaders that saw the same thing. And it was when he was in the debate with all the other candidates for the Republican candidate. I think it was Megyn Kelly. She asked Trump the question, or told him that he called women pigs. And do you guys remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that question there that she formulated was a kill shot, right? It would have ended any politician. But what Trump did was is that he said only Rosie O'Donnell, and the whole room erupted in laughter. And then I remember that, and I was like, oh my gosh, what he just did there is he changed the energy and the direction of the question to his favor, which typically most politicians would have been apologetic and all of that, and it would have ended their run. But when I saw Trump being able to control the energy of the room and the direction of the questions, to me that was technique. And so I was like, okay, this guy got some real stuff. He's not just a normal politician. He understands marketing, he understands branding, he understands energy, he understands all these things. So I was like, okay, this guy might actually win. That's that's when I started shifting from the underdog to like this is the dog. Like I think he really can. You can throw anything at him, and he'll be able to modify the feelings around it. And
Did that
so
shift come really quick from your just kind of following him just because he was the underdog to wow, he might have something? Was that a pretty quick transition once you realized that? And it was
I,
really early on in his primary. In
you
his
know what's interesting is I didn't really support Trump's policies
Mhm.
until he was in office,
Okay.
because I don't trust any politician and their policies prior to going in office, because typically it's they say they'll do this and then they go ahead and do the other things. And
Definitely.
so I gave the same skepticism to Trump that I did with other Democrats. And so I wait until they get into the office and I see what they actually do, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's and the actions is what gains what brings me in more. And then he just had Hillary as the other side, and I was just like, well, I definitely am not going for that. But in terms of the speed of transitioning, my interest level jumped even more in Trump when that happened. And
Okay.
so, and there were so many other things too, where he used his own money to fund his campaigns. Like he had skin in the game. There were so many other things too, and he would say it. I love that he wasn't filtered, right?
I think that's what a lot of people loved about him was. He had no
Right.
filter. Yeah.
And the no filter part, number one, was awesome because he's saying everything that the people want to say to the people they want to say it to, right?
Uh-huh.
But on the other hand, is I love it because what Trump says, like that's what you get. Because he said a lot of dumb things too,
Oh,
right? If
definitely.
we're honest about it. And so I love the transparency of how Trump just says things, and he'll say some things that are just like, oh boy. but but at the same time, like, yeah, but his actions were just awesome. And I was really, I was not happy. I was sad when he didn't win um for a second term, but I kind of expected it too,
Mhm.
given the ripple effects that he created throughout his presidency and all the waves. Like if you poke the bear is going to come back, right? And I
Definitely.
think he poked so many bears. And so yeah, I like Trump for his persuasion techniques. Um, and I wanted him over Hillary. By the way, side note, I think I see the same persuasion techniques with AOC.
Interesting.
And I believe that the Republican Party is making the same mistake with AOC that the Democrats made with Trump.
Interesting.
Like,
That's an
yeah,
interesting perspective. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a scary thought, is what that is.
but it
Yeah,
is,
it's
and I think that she is super strategic and smart, whereas most Republicans look at her as a dumb clown, right? And I'm like,
yeah.
ooh, dude, you're underestimating her.
Mm.
She's going to be president one day because of how little you underestimate her. I mean, think about what she did for Texas. She
Yeah.
raised like what, $2-3 million, and Ted Cruz was in Mexico, right? Like,
Interesting.
but if you look at that, like, she's not doing it because she cares. I'll tell you that much. She saw the opportunity and she saw the branding, and she saw that Ted Cruz had a bad angle and a bad branding, and she jumped on
He
that, and
capitalized well.
she did. And so yeah, I that doesn't mean I like her, but I gotta
You got
give
to
her
respect
prop.
you got to respect the tactics and everything. That's a very interesting perspective because I've always seen her as like a clown and just you can
Right.
literally pick people up by their bootstraps and the blah blah. She says some stupid stuff. So did Trump, and that's a really interesting correlation. She's a lot
Yeah,
younger too.
right, exactly. And you just gotta be careful because he went from he went from something non-related to politics to president. She was a waiter
Mhm.
to where she's at now. You do not get there if you're an idiot. And I think
True.
that Republicans
Mhm.
are making a mistake by underestimating her. Even though she lied about, being at the Capitol and all that,
Mhm.
like she knew she lied.
Yeah,
But everyone was talking about it,
he
right?
was the number one story for a few days.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
she's a beast mode persuader. And
That's one thing I remember you talking about with Trump early on was The Art of the Deal. Is that his book? The Art
yep,
of the
Yeah.
Deal. Yeah, and how he uses those shock and awe techniques just to get talked about. He doesn't.
right.
Yeah, and that's exactly
All
what happened with her.
exactly. And so all the left had to do to beat Trump the first time was read his book.
It's
And they
true.
did not. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, anyway, and so that's pretty much my history with Trump. I went to his inauguration. I was right next to Duck Dynasty
Oh,
at his
no.
inauguration, and we were there. I was so sick, but we were like over there, and it was so funny being at the inauguration. Like the what do you call it? The news didn't show what the what the crowd was chanting, but the entire time it was like lock her up, lock, like just the funniest things. And
The energy
man,
in his rallies is phenomenal.
it was awesome. It
Yeah.
was it was it was great. But anyway, I didn't want to take up too much time with that
Oh no,
introduction.
like I appreciate that perspective. Again, you made me into a Trump believer And I think he also made me into a Trump believer when he started saying and doing what he would say.
Yeah.
And that's why like he is not your standard politician, and he was underestimated. And that is and so what do you think he's going to be doing now? What do you think his next move is? Do you think he's done with politics? Do you think he's going to?
That's a good question. I've been hearing a lot of rumors about him starting his own social media platform, right?
Okay. I've heard
And
like that, yeah.
and there's problems with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great, but the amount of technology that goes into supporting half of the country in one platform,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of money, a lot of dev time,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that goes in there. And then typically most software companies, they go off of other servers like Amazon servers. And so if he does that, I think it'll be okay, but yeah,
You would have to learn from what Parler did, because that's kind of what Parler was, right? And it was holding on to this influx of people, but they were on Amazon Web Services, and they said that they violated terms and agreement. That's a whole other argument, but yeah, the infrastructure for something like that is phenomenal if you don't want to get shut down.
right. It's huge. And some people are like, why don't we just create our own social media platform? Well, do we want to get technical about it? Because it's massive. Not like it's massive. And so, and then how are you going to market it? You're going to market it through Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
like those are the key components to getting the word out to the people you want to bring to your platform. But back to the question you were saying is, what do I think you do? Honestly, I have a gut feeling that he may have been a little bit happy that he lost. I think that, and maybe it's because I don't know. I just think about the amount of pressure, right? That job has, and not only that, he went from being being loved by everyone. Like he was great. He had money, he had power, he had influence, he had fans, and then he went into a completely different. He went into politics, and suddenly, and I think he already knew this, but 50% of the country just hated him, right? And just imagine having to switch from just being someone that everyone's like jump to 50% you're a Nazi, you're terrible, you're going to end the world, all that stuff. I feel like a little bit of him is kind of like,
I need a break.
I need a break from that, and perhaps like spend some time with his family and things like that. But I still think he's a patriot. But I wouldn't
100%.
I wouldn't blame him if he was okay not being trashed every single second of every day.
Yeah, you gotta like that. That's got to be taxing, and that's kind of one thing that a lot of people on the left, especially, don't really understand. Is like he lost money. He did not make anything. If anything, like you were saying, he went from being super popular, 100% of people liking him, give or take, to losing half of his popularity, and people not just not liking him, but demonizing him and thinking he is Satan reincarnate.
Oh yeah.
Like that is a mind shift of I don't think anyone really could comprehend.
Right. And people think that he's ego driven. Like it's so interesting that people think that, because if you really had ego, you couldn't take 100% or 50% of the country hating you.
It's true.
Yeah.
Just think about that, right? You would have to have your ego in check to be able to handle the hatred that comes towards you. Because people that have huge egos get very defensive if you say just even the smallest things about them. And so I thought that he was actually super humble in a lot of ways. He was in your face. He punched back if you punched at him, but I don't think I could take that kind of I feel like I have an ego, and if people just started trashing me for no reason, I feel like I wouldn't be focused on America. I would be focused on me, just defending me the entire 4 years. But he was focused on America, and he did do things, and yeah, I just feel like I feel like he was one of the best presidents there ever was, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that started to break down I think I really kind of started to see it during the first presidential debate. Is it was just chaos, and it when you have someone lying to your face and lying about you, it's hard not to get defensive and like, no, that is not true, and interrupt them
Mhm.
and interrupt and interrupt. And so you can kind of see that. And I think he was getting a little tired, like you were saying, towards the end
Yeah,
of it all.
yeah.
But
But you know what? I think he changed the country already with this 4 years
mhm.
in bringing forth the tagline fake news. I don't think the country was aware how much they were lied to until Trump came.
Yeah,
And so,
So true.
and so he brought that forth, and in his 4 years, completely changed everything. And now everyone knows the line fake news. And even I think it's Finland. Did you guys hear about Finland?
mm,
Like Finland is so scared of fake news that they're now teaching their children in not primary, but they're teaching their kids
mhm.
at a young age how to spot fake news.
Interesting.
But yeah, and they're not just teaching it like, oh, Fox News is fake news, CNN's fake news. They're teaching the persuasion techniques that liars use. And so
Wow.
the kids in Finland are growing up knowing how to spot liars, whether they're on the right or the left, which I think is amazing. And I honestly don't think that that would have happened without Trump.
Yeah, he fundamentally changed, I think, the way we're going to see politics for the rest of our lives. And
Mhm.
that being just one thing, that's interesting. I want to read that article, and then I'll
Yeah.
tag that in the show notes once we can find that. But that's fascinating, and I think that's another thing that a lot of people have a hard time is they get so caught up in their side and their team that they're not willing to acknowledge that they might be supporting fake news just on with a left or a right twist to everything, and to be very objective
Mhm.
about your perspective in that stuff.
Right, right.
Interesting. Well, cool. That was good. Okay, so we're going to continue with our Bill of Rights series, and number 2 is on the docket. Amendment number 2. Ben, do you have that pulled up?
I do.
You
Let
want to
me
go
go
ahead and
ahead
read?
and read that. We're going
Yeah,
to
go
start
for it.
off with the original and the basic text of the Second Amendment, and we'll dive into it and kind of piece it apart. So it says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Okay. Boom. So, what does that mean today, Ben?
Depends on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
So what it means today, man. Well, I mean, let's go back actually. Let's start off what or why it was originally created or written that way, and then we can talk about what it means today. So if you look back, I think we've discussed it, who knows how many times, the Second Amendment was written so we could keep and preserve all of our other original rights and freedoms, our life, our pursuit of happiness, and our liberties. Without the Second Amendment, we of course would not even be a country. We wouldn't be the United States of America. We would still be under the reign of the United Kingdom. So
Yeah, and it's just kind of with that idea we left last podcast off with about the fourth branch, and how the First Amendment is really the idea for people to propose ideas to change government. And when tyrannical government gets out of hand, the next check and balance that people have is the Second Amendment against against tyranny. And so we did that with Britain, and I don't think anything has really changed in the application of this wording. The only thing that really has changed is we haven't had to literally use it against our own government yet. And in the revolutionary times, they did.
Exactly. And I hope we never have to use it
No, yeah, it's the last
in
resort
that
of
sense
violence.
again. But if we start seeing a government trying to infringe upon our rights as an American people, then unfortunately that's eventually what's going to happen.
Yeah, kind of. I think a lot about. I was super saddened by what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, because I was really excited that there were actually senators and people of the House that were contesting and challenging the electoral votes. And I thought it was a legitimate constitutional process. It is a legitimate constitutional process, but it kind of went out the window the second those people started rioting and breaking into the Capitol buildings. But you got to think of like what led up to that moment. That was the culmination of being ignored, of being lied to, and not of the courts not listening to the vote, and of all these things that just built up and built up, and it just exploded into this violent outburst. And that's what happens with violence. War, I can't remember where I heard it, but war is a physical representation of ideas and philosophies. That's all war is.
That's
And
interesting.
that's kind of what you saw with the Capitol riots. That violence was a physical representation of them being ignored about the vote, and just the whole unknowns, all the unknowns that came with this last 2020 election. Poe, yeah, what are your thoughts on all this?
On the Second Amendment,
It's kind of what we've been talking about.
You know, Ben said something that actually is interesting and scary too when Ben says it. And so, and Ben and I, we can kind of duke this out, and I think the audience will benefit from us exchanging this. But something that Ben said, and you guys let me know if I get out of line. This is your podcast and stuff.
Oh yeah, I will smack you across the interwebs. Don't worry, man.
Yeah. Are you gonna silence me? Are you going to
We're gonna censor you for sure.
You're gonna censor me?
No, yeah, we love
cancel me.
Yeah, we'll definitely not cancel you. So
something that Ben said was he said if the government does X, then unfortunately the result is we will come after the government. At least that's what I took. Or we're going to use our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves and pretty much get rid of that government. Am I understanding that correctly, Ben?
In a sense, yes. And the point that if that ever happened is hopefully, 100, 200 plus years down the road, to where that type of involvement from our citizens, us as Black put it earlier, the fourth party, having to take up and bear arms against our own government. Hopefully that never happens, but that's why the Second Amendment was put into place.
Which makes sense, right? And if you look at the Nazi Party, right? If the 6 million Jews had guns, would the Holocaust happen? Right? Probably not. Right?
yeah,
or at least it'll be minimized, or there's enough friction to stop, right? Because I don't know how big the Nazi army was, but 6 million with guns, that's an army, man. And in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, that's sorry, give me a second here. So I can see how the Second Amendment is created to protect the citizen from a tyrannical government, right? One of the thoughts that I had is I'm actually more worried about conservatives becoming the tyrannical group.
interesting.
Let me throw this idea out there, and just know I'm conservative as well, and I do own guns, and so I understand it. And so I'm looking at myself as well, because one of the things that Jordan Peterson brings up And when I listen to that guy, I make sure that I really take to heart what he's saying. And one of the things that he asked his students is, if you were in Germany's time, do you think that you would not be one of those soldiers at the Nazi camps?
I remember. I remember this. Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
And all of his students were like, of course not. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to be the one that fights the Nazis and all of that. And that was such an alarming answer to Jordan Peterson, because as a clinical psychologist, he understood that the statistics, number one, majority of people are not brave.
Mhm.
Majority of people, if they lived during that Nazi era, would probably be a Nazi,
Or at
and
least in
then
support of the Nazis.
or in support of the Nazis, right? And so I started asking myself, what makes a tyrannical government,
Mhm.
or how did Hitler convince the people to do that heinous act, or did he just embody what the people already felt, and he was just a rallying person? The reason I bring that up is that Germany, and correct me if I'm wrong on my history,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to put the pieces together. Germany lost World War One, right? And on top of losing that war and all the economic problems with that, they had hyperinflation, which even if you had savings and investments, you would have been completely broke. And
Mhm.
people were taking barrels of money to get a loaf of bread. Think about how desperate that situation is, right? And
Mhm.
in psychology classes, they asked that question. If your family was hungry and there was one bread, but you had to take it from someone else, what would you do?
Yeah.
Right?
You'd probably
I,
take it.
I'm telling you right now, if my kids, if it ever gets to that situation, and I'm being completely honest as an individual who's selfish and has human nature, I will do whatever it takes to feed my kids.
Definitely.
Right. And so what Jordan Peterson was trying to say is that in the situations that the Germans were in and all of that, we have to look at what created that problem, created that tyranny.
Mhm.
And now I'm going away from Jordan Peterson, and here's my opinion, and I'll tie it back to what Ben said. I think it takes a very desperate situation to create tyranny at that level,
Hmm.
right?
I agree. Yeah.
Right? And you just don't go killing people. Like I think about the politicians now. I don't think that they're Nazi level desperate.
Yeah.
I think they're just purely selfish. They
Mhm.
they they do whatever is in their own self-interest, and that's human nature across the board. But it takes a desperate situation to put someone in that point. And by the way, like Hitler, he had like 6 friends. 5 of them got killed in a second when from a bomb. Boom, killed them all. That changes people, right? And what would it have to take to change people to the point they get so desperate that they start killing other people? And from a psychology standpoint, in 2020, who feels the most desperate?
Well,
Is it the
definitely right now.
Democrats or is it the conservatives?
It is, and that's where I think a lot of people are really worried about, and I agree with you. Yeah, when you put like you were saying with Trump earlier, he poking bears. You poke a bear long enough, it's gonna lash out, and this bear has guns.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
here's the thing is that the conservatives, they're keeping it in,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Because that's
They're
your natural, like the Christian based
it's
conservative charity mentality is to kind of turn the other cheek, turn the other. You only can do that for so long, though.
you can only do it for so long. And let's say it gets so bad that people are just getting to a point where they're just like, I'm so fed up, and suddenly there's a conservative Hitler coming up and rallying everyone and
Mhm.
saying the left is a tyrannical government,
And I
and
think that's what
everyone that supports them it is time to use our guns.
Yeah.
See, and the only reason, Ben, that I bring that up is because I really want to encourage both your viewers and mine that as we approach this, that we don't get so caught up in ourselves that we're not humble enough to say that we can become the tyrant.
Mhm.
And when you look at the number of military guns out there as opposed to the numbers that are in the citizens' hands, the citizens is a bigger army given the government has bigger guns. But like, yes, the government can become tyrannical, but based on human development and human nature, it can go both ways. Is my point.
Hmm.
It's just what
Oh yeah,
I'm getting at.
no doubt, without a doubt.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm talking so much.
Oh, no,
Sorry, guys.
you're good. We're just fascinated. Is Poe just keep telling us? No,
Listen
but
to all this knowledge just coming out of his brain.
yeah, or have his butt, one of the two. Frick.
depends on what you like or don't like about what I'm saying.
That's why we started this podcast, though, is to bring up these conversations so people are seeing it from more than just one point of view, because that's what's important.
Yeah, and
Right.
we are coming at it with a Republican conservative spin, but I think the younger Republicans in general are not your typical established Republicans that have been there, and yeah. Anyways, any other thoughts?
Sorry to derail it, guys.
Oh no, that was great.
You're good.
That was fantastic.
I just been around. It comes from experience. I've been around gang members that had guns,
Hmm.
and in their minds, their motive was as pure as snow.
Oh, definitely. We all think, and
To
that's kind of when you were talking about how like that not having that self-reflection, I thought about it from like the biblical perspective and the whole Lord is it I kind of mentality
you
that
got
a
it.
lot of people don't have, like, and that takes a lot of discipline. And I know myself, I fall into that trap to where yeah, that ego gets in the way, and no, I am doing what's right. I yeah, and so taking a step
Absolutely.
back and having that humility to ask yourself, am I the problem? That takes a
Right.
lot. That takes a lot.
I had
This is
had
what.
had a conversation at dinner last night, actually. More so along the last part of the Second Amendment, and it's those rights shall not be infringed upon. And I mean, I was kind of like, I have to humble myself and have this conversation, but it's the fact that if you take your extreme, your right extremists who believe that 100%, where that shall not be infringed, meaning anybody can go into a gun store and buy a firearm. That's nonsense and is not even, shouldn't even be considered. We need to find that common ground, and the word gun control gets taken out of context. Gun control, if you're a right extremist, you look at it as trying to take away all firearms, not allowing anybody to have that, not even law enforcement, take it out of the hands of anybody that's not military. But we got to find that common ground. If you can't pass a background check, if you can't pass a criminal history check, if you are mentally unstable, you're homicidal or suicidal, you definitely should not own a firearm. And so we just need to draw that line and make it more established on what gun control actually is.
I guess your ex-wife can determine that too now, right?
Oh man, I hate that bill though.
Okay,
That's too far. That's too
a
far.
perfect transition. Let's talk about HR 127. Let's do it. So, you want to give us a quick rundown of what that is, Ben, for those of who may not know what we're talking about?
So HR 127 is a bill that is currently, hold on, I'm going to pull it up and see where it's currently standing because I haven't looked since last week. So it is currently still just introduced into the House, and so it's being reviewed by the House of Representatives right now. Background on it, they are calling I'm going to butcher the name, Sabika Sheikh Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. They're basing it off of a school shooting that happened where a I believe she was 13. Correct me if you know, 13 or
I
15.
do know.
She was killed by someone with a firearm. So, and that was in Texas. Um, Representative Jackson Lee, or Sheila Jackson Lee, has decided to sponsor this bill and to introduce it to the House. But if we go into it, I had a part pulled up, but now hold on one second.
The lady's so funny, isn't she? I read that she took a first class seat from a Democratic person and called her racist. Did you guys? I heard that and I was just like, oh man.
And this is who was that again?
Sheila Lee or something like that. The one
Yeah,
that,
so it's
the one that's
Sheila Jackson Lee's
Jackson Lee.
yeah.
her full name.
That's right. I forget the lady who's proposed this bill.
So there's too much that goes into it. I was gonna have some specifics in it, but it's just so long. Basically, here's the biggest points in it. So any magazine over 10 rounds, you will get fined. I believe it's up to $8,000 per magazine for any magazine over 10 rounds. It would ban and make illegal to purchase or own any type of assault rifle. You can't see me, but I'm air quoting any type of assault rifle from being regulated, or like I said, it would be banned from the private citizens. You'd have to be law enforcement or military, and it can only be work related. Each firearm has to be insured, which I think was a minimum of $500 insurance deposit, I think is how it's worded. It's an insurance deposit
On the firearm, right?
per firearm, correct.
Firearm. Okay.
The place where your firearms are stored has to be inspected and approved, meaning that they can come in and see where you store your firearms. They have to approve of the safe that the firearms are stored in.
Really? I did not see that part.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
If you are younger than 21 and you own a firearm, you can automatically be deemed as a felon for possessing a firearm, even though you purchased it prior to this bill
Legally, there's no grandfathering in.
Not that I have read as I've gone line by line. There might be later on somewhere in a different clause, but from what I've read so far, there isn't. Bo mentioned earlier, so there's a psychological evaluation done by another air quote third party shrink who will do a portion of a background check as well, where they will be able to pick any person they want to question about you. So they can take your ex-wife who completely hates you and despises you, and they can interview her and ask her any questions they want to see if you should be allowed to own a firearm.
So I'm just going to jump in here real quick for that, because
there's so much. Go ahead.
there is a lot, and it all hinges on two different liberal. I'm going to come out with an article in a series of this, but the liberal tactics that they use, and this whole bill, HR 127, hinges on two major tactics or strategies that the left uses a lot. The first of all is the emotional or the pathos concept of, it was named after Rebecca Sheik. We're going to look up that article. Don't hold us accountable at this moment, but that article it's named after was after a school shooting or a mass shooting at some degree. A lot of the times they propose these things are on the anniversary of major mass shootings. And so you already have that emotional response and that emotional trigger when they're proposing these fundamental changes to the Constitution. Another one is a lot of it is subjective. subjective. An assault rifle, that isn't a very subjective term. There is no hardcore definition of what an assault weapon is. And
Well,
also,
if it weighs as much as 10 boxes, then you know you
yeah,
have an assault rifle.
yeah, and your
Or you
AR-15 shoots a 50 caliber round. Massive.
but I mean, I'm gonna come back to that point. She's being very strategic on that. She's
Mhm.
using 10 boxes. When she says 10 boxes, what do you think of? 10 boxes. She's being very visual.
Mhm.
She could have said it weighs 36 kilograms or whatever, but people don't remember that. But in psychology, if you make it visual, then people remember it.
No matter
And
how
so
crazy it is.
exactly, and that's why Trump, he was like, it's gonna be a big, beautiful wall. Like he always uses visuals because it sticks in the human brain. And so my point is that she's using strategy, psychological strategies that work. And
Yeah.
even the 50 caliber stuff,
Mhm.
like I think she did that on purpose because people will talk about it. It's something Trump did. And so
Well,
yeah.
if she did it on purpose, so here's kind of my rebuttal to something like that is it makes her look like she doesn't know, and this is kind of where the hardcore, not even the hardcore, just the people who believe in the Second Amendment and love their guns, these are the people that are proposing the bills are people who don't know what they're talking about. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if it might be some strategy. That's an interesting perspective on it. But at the same time, I if that was her first time holding a gun, she doesn't even know the basic fundamentals. And that's what Biden not posted, proposed with the common sense gun reform bills. That's another very subjective term because common sense for me and for you guys, for anyone that's really handled a firearm is you don't point your gun at anything you're not willing to shoot or destroy. You keep your finger off the trigger until you're willing to pull it. You know what's beyond the target, and um, you treat every weapon as if it's loaded, like the basic firearm safety. That's common sense for me. But whereas common sense for some other people is low capacity magazine or just getting rid of.
Yeah. So it says the term military style weapons means, and it lists them out, and it says any of the firearms or copies or duplicates of the firearms in any caliber known as, and like I said, it lists actual brands, the Beretta AR-70, so you can't own a Beretta AR-70, a Colt AR-15.
Okay.
If it has a revolving cylinder shotgun, and then they go into a semi-automatic rifle that has an ability to accept a detachable magazine and has at least two of. So if you can detach the magazine is one. And then if it's got a folding stock or a telescoping stock, which is any modern M4 has a stock that you can retract or extend, a pistol grip that protrudes conspicuously beneath the action of the weapon, so it can't have a pistol grip on it. Any type of bayonet mount. It can't have a flash suppressor or a threaded barrel designed to accommodate a flash suppressor.
Or
It
probably
can't have a grenade launcher.
Yeah.
I want a grenade launcher. But
Uh,
like they listed out on all of these things that you can get for a 22.
okay. So
Or
yeah, kind of going.
like it's going to ban everything except for your old school hunting rifles that are, you know, a bolt action hunting rifle is basically what that is going to allow to be legal.
Yeah. Okay. So let me backpedal. So
Mm.
yes, it is subjective saying assault weapons, but now after having you read that, that is their definition of assault weapon is basically every gun.
Exactly.
And so it's very specific in that aspect of, and that's kind of what I mean by the subjective nature. The subjective nature can kind of go however they want it to go. And in this case, it is pretty much every gun, every type of gun, because most guns like pistol grips, like that is the most comfortable and most secure way to fire a firearm, unless you're shooting a long range hunting rifle with a bigger caliber for. But anyways, I digress. So that's kind of HR 127. And
Oh man, it's
what
frustrating.
falls in the common sense gun reform bill that President Biden and the Democrats are proposing. So what
Oh
is
yeah, and I did my own fact check really quick. I got to correct it. It's $800 per firearm for insurance, and you can only be fined up to $10,000 for the magazines. So no matter how many you own, you can only be fined up to $10,000 for those magazines. So I just fact checked myself, but there you go. So you're still fined a hell of a lot.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so what would common sense from a Republican standpoint, what would common sense gun reform look like? Because we kind of we're seeing what it
That's a
looks like
good
from a
question.
Democratic. What are you guys' thoughts on that? I have an article in case you guys need some time to think. I can read about that article. But
Well, I think kind of like what you said is your basic common understanding of a firearm. You need to go through some type of basic firearms safety course so you have a better understanding of how to operate, manipulate, store, secure a firearm.
Mhm.
We already have a fairly good background check in place for anyone who wants to purchase a firearm. I don't know if we really need to go more in depth on those.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I think a lot of people think that, especially people that have never purchased a firearm. Stephen Crowder did a episode on this, but
It is.
yeah, it's a very
It's a good one.
it's a very elaborate process. It's a very long background check, and it's not your. It makes it look easy for those people that have gone through the process and maybe have a concealed carry permit and already have a background check on file, but it's not just go. It's not like buying a car. At
Right.
all.
Yeah, exactly. And then like I said earlier, there should be some type of psychological uh check, whatever, even if it's an online questionnaire that it kind of bases, is this person suicidal or homicidal, because those are the two people we really don't want to have firearms because of what their possible intent with those firearms might be.
Mhm.
But something like that, we just trying to limit the wrong people getting the firearms, I guess, is the easiest way to put that.
It makes it a little bit tough because how do you determine that someone is unfit? What are the parameters in terms of how do you like figure out intent?
That is a very difficult thing. That's what
That's
makes criminal cases so hard. The second that they say the intent was, and this was what happened with the George Floyd case, was the second they started saying that his intent was to go in and kill George Floyd, that makes it very hard then to, yeah, like how do you know what someone's intent is? And that makes the criminal case more likely to get thrown out. This is the second you define someone's intent. And I don't agree with what happened with George Floyd at all. But I was really concerned when I heard that was what they're trying to do, is define his intent as in man, as he wanted to kill him.
Could I ask you guys some questions? Because I'm actually
Go
not
for it.
Second Amendment stuff. Like I listen to all the arguments and stuff like that on both sides, but I'm not fully educated. But what do you think is the intent behind this bill? Because I've heard
Okay.
extreme examples. I've heard like, well, why do you think that the Democrats are putting this bill forward? Like, why are they introducing it? Is it for money? Is it for control? Is it for power? Is it like, what is the conservative body? What is their main concern about this?
Well, I can't speak for the main conservative body, but this is kind of just what I've thought about it, because it's such a radical and almost ridiculous proposal that really isn't going to fly. And this is what um, the left does a lot. And kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about how um, what led up to this moment, what led up to the moment Hitler became Hitler, and all the little things that came here and there. And there's this concept called the Overton window. And it's basically this radical, nothing radical happens right away. It gets proposed. The radical agenda, like this bill, is getting proposed, and knowing that it's not going to get, it's proposed knowing it's not going to get passed. And their goal is, this is just my opinion with it. They're proposing this radical bill, knowing it's not going to get passed, but also knowing that conservatives will compromise and kind of meet them halfway. They will meet them halfway at some point with this bill. And that halfway meetup, that becomes the new starting line for their next radical proposal. And they'll propose something even more radical than HR 127. And we will meet them halfway again. And eventually those halfway meetups lead up to an actual HR 127. That's my perspective. And that's what I would do if I was proposing something like that.
And then that seems like that makes sense, especially from a psychological point as well, is that if people can warm up to ideas over time. Definitely. A few years ago, First Amendment was such a core thing, and it was untouchable, right? And now they banned the president or President Trump off of Twitter at the most crucial time, right? And so over time, I see what you're saying. It just erodes that or gets people used to it. At least that's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I see it. I don't know if you have a different take on that, Ben, or on his question, but
we kind of mentioned this. We had drills this past weekend, and I kind of mentioned this before, but the Supreme Court's they haven't made a ruling yet, as far as what I've heard. But the fact that the Supreme Court is even deciding or bringing it to case whether the police can enter a home to seize guns without a warrant, and that's something that actually got brought up, which kind of like what you were asking is where does this take? But it also comes down to where there's this fine line of, if we lessen or make more restrictions on this bill, we are going to take away this specific right in the Fourth Amendment and unlawful search and seizure. Because if the Supreme Court comes out and says, yeah, you live in New York, which means you can't own a firearm, police get in there and remove those firearms without a warrant. Basically, we're just getting rid of all these bills or all these amendments right and left, so we can compromise, or so we can get rid of one specific thing. And it can't happen. And the fact that like I said, the fact that it even got brought up to the Supreme Court to see if we could go into someone's home without a warrant. Well, I'm a police officer, and I can tell you right now, I'm not going to go into someone's home unless they A, give me permission, or B, I have a warrant to go into the home. I would never even question it, and I would never even think about going into someone's home unless, of course, exigent circumstance and someone's life is in danger. That's the only time that it's ever been deemed lawful to ever enter a home without a warrant or without someone's permission, is that someone's life is in danger, which comes back to, of course, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's kind of where the basis of everything should be founded on.
Yeah, I remember that conversation, Ben, and it's interesting how, kind of going back to, I think, our first podcast, the Bill of Rights. If you want, the perfect way to be anti-American is just to start going down the checklist of Bill of Rights. Okay, take away this, take away that, take away this. And the unlawful search and seizures, that's one that really hasn't been addressed in a while, but this could be a good opportunity to start addressing that.
Because I agree with everything you guys are saying. And I don't like this bill at all either. I guess my question is like, how do you stop them? Because we can talk all day about how much we don't like it, right? But what can I do to actually help? Like, some people say, get the word out. Well, they're silencing us, right?
Yeah.
And so what can we do to help fight this erosion of our principles?
I
A good
I like
question for sure.
yeah, that is a good question. It kind of goes into something else that was on the docket to talk about. But what Utah, did you hear about what Utah proposed with their HB 60 with the permitless carry? Did you hear about that, Poe?
No, I didn't.
So Utah just barely passed basically constitutional carry to where you don't need a concealed can carry, you don't need a gun carry permit, geez, um, anymore to carry a firearm, to carry a handgun on you, concealed or open. And the caveat to that is a lot of people were freaking out on the left about what does that mean for Utah? Anyone could just carry, blah blah blah. But the caveat to that was one, criminals are going to carry anyways. I think this was in, I can't remember if it was in the bill or in a press conference when they were addressing the bill. But basically, criminals are going to carry anyways. So the idea that this is going to create more criminals carrying guns is just it has no correlation. And two is now the funds 50%. I'll post this in the show notes, but I can't remember if it's 50% of whatever is left over or whatever is left over of the funds that would go to, oh my gosh, the funds that would go to funding the concealed permit process and all those fees and everything. I'm pretty sure it's 50% of those excess funds would go to education in suicide prevention and education in firearm safety. I think that is a great alternative of meeting and just being educated with firearms and being educated on the suicide front because Joe Rogan, I was listening to one of his older podcasts with Steven Crowder, and he brought up the point that he thinks that there's a mental illness issue in the country that is being disguised or being confused with a firearm issue.
Yep.
And so being able to address these mental illnesses that may lead to suicide will definitely at some point lead to some sort of mass shooting. And being able to really have an honest conversation about the mental health of some of these individuals that are committing these committing this gun violence. And so I think that's a way to address that problem and kind of solve that, not necessarily solve, but at least, yeah, it's a solution kind of to what you were saying, Poe. It's a solution to this gun proposal, these radical gun reform bills. Oh no, I was all over the place on that one, but
My biggest concern is that the Republicans have a losing strategy.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like they're gonna, based on what I've seen, like I don't think we have a winning strategy when it comes to the things that are important to us, because we're talking to emotional people logically,
It's true.
Yeah,
right?
Very
And
true.
it's such a losing strategy because when people are emotional, they're just not gonna listen. You have confirmation bias, which they'll take whatever you say, and by the time it hits the brain, it became something else. And so, and Jordan Peterson was talking about the different types of brains between Republicans and Democrats, and how their brains are very, very different. And I don't know. I feel like the reason why Trump was such a big threat to the Democrats was because he was once a Democrat.
he
It's
knew
true.
he was an insider threat. Definitely.
Yeah, and he doesn't use logic. Because humans, as much as we want to pretend that we're logical creatures, we're emotional. And that's why the media is so powerful. Because if everyone was logical, the media will have no power.
Yeah.
But the reason that the media is powerful is because they understand emotions, right? And they know how to draw an audience in, even if they consciously don't want to, it draws them in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about, okay, we have a Second Amendment problem that they're going after that. What's this plan to stop that? Well, we can talk about it. Okay, I get that, but how are you going to get the emotions right?
Hmm.
To I don't know. I haven't heard
It's
a strategy from anybody. Um, Ben Shapiro or Louder with Crowder
Dan
or
Bongino, yeah,
yeah, I haven't. They're all logical people, and
yeah.
they do really well with their audience.
Well, and that's what Crowder was. He's coined the term. The Republican Party is full of a bunch of Spocks and not enough Kirks. And
Yeah.
and yeah, we're filled with all these logical people, and it's a very good point of how do we address this? How do we get on the offense? Because we're always on defense, always on defense, always on defense.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. That's a great question that I think we could start fleshing out and start thinking about, because that's a really good point.
Because we
it's
have
huge
this.
because
Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, while we're sitting there, remember that article we tried to find it? It took us 20 minutes to find it on what was that, Saturday or yesterday,
Oh yeah, yeah.
about the Florida shooting. Like
Yes. Yeah.
that just gets put on the back burner, and the article was frontline for like 10 minutes and then got taken down. All
Yeah.
right. So basically, this article, there was a gunman who it potentially could have been an active shooter situation in Florida. He was near an airport,
Yeah. This
but
happened on Sunday.
unfortunately for him, and great for our stance, is um, he starts to shoot off rounds, and he's right next to a gun store. And so multiple people with guns went and shot him, took him down before he could kill or injure more people. But the article made frontline news in Florida on Fox News for like 10 minutes. And then I might not even be able to find it again. Like
Oh,
that's how it is.
I saved that link. Don't worry. So that will be in the show notes for sure.
But to Ben's point, that's the sad part, right? That we have to save the link.
Yeah. Yeah.
The algorithm in big tech control. They have AI that controls what people see based on their locations and based on the data they have, which is a different variable to the problem we're trying to solve. And I don't think we're going to win the argument the way we're doing it. You do not beat big tech.
It's impossible to beat them.
I wouldn't say it's impossible because Louder Crowder is filing a lawsuit against them, which
That's true.
Good for him, man. That guy has balls of steel.
Oh, I
Good
love Crowder.
for him. Like he's done more than people in Congress has. But there has to be a way to a winning strategy. I'm telling you, the Democrats, because they're emotional, understand emotions and they know how to use it. They're so smart. They're so smart. They know how to do it. And I feel like we don't. We're too logical.
Yeah.
Well, let me pull up this argument here and this. Like Ben Shapiro, I love him, but he would be a great press secretary, a terrible president, right? He's just too logical and he shuts down arguments really, really well. But you don't win people, you win logical people that way, right? But you don't win people emotionally. And then I don't know, guys. I my biggest worry is we were bringing a stick to a flamethrower fight, and and the left. Not to make things sound so grim, but
But you are.
they are much smarter than than they're much smarter than Republicans at the political game.
Definitely. And kind of with that, and that's kind of what has led us to this crossroads that we're at, is we took for granted their intelligence and their acumen when it came to big tech. They saw the potential with that, with marketing, and with utilizing those for their purposes. And you got to respect that strategy. I definitely do. And that's just kind of one thing that I love about Dan Bongino, that he came up with this concept a while back, and and I can't get it out of my mind, is creating a parallel economy and using the liberal tactics that they have, but using him for us. And he is lately been very passionate about going on the offense and actually holding them to their own standards and to their own rules. And I think the parallel economy is something that really needs to be looked into. And it's not a safe space. It's not this technological safe space for conservatives. It's another vehicle for conservatives to do exactly what liberals are doing in the tech industry. And I think that might be one of the best ways that we can actually solve these problems is creating these parallel economies. Parler was one example that got shut down super hard, but they'll be back. I know that they'll be back. They're figuring it out. Rumble's another great example of that, and they have a lot of work. These spaces have a lot of work, and they're brand new to the tech and the user experience. But I think that's a step in the right direction. Is creating that parallel economy for other people.
Will the left let us do that?
We'll have to figure out a way, and that's I know a lot of problem that people are coming into with that, but I think it will do. It will work. I have hope in something like that, but that's just me and my optimistic self. So
It's good. It's a good balance for your guests you brought on today.
yeah, brought us down to earth, man. Just hard without a parachute, dude.
I know. I just want to win. I want to win, and
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's no winning path right now. And yeah, especially the Second Amendment, they took away the first right in front of our faces. And they pretty much just said, pretty much F you, we're going to take it. We took your president off of Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dude,
it is,
man.
We're definitely in the trenches right now, but I think that I don't know. I just have a good feeling. There's nothing to back up that good feeling with, but I think that I want to win, and that's kind of why we started this podcast, was because we want to win. We're tired of the Republican Party and people like Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell and their establishment mentality, and it's our party. We're taking it back, and it's just a matter of how we do that. I think it's multiple different fronts of the battlefield in this metaphorical battlefield. Excuse me, geez Louise. Yeah, and this is just one way to, I think, do it, is getting the word out for sure, being logical for one. But yeah, I think we need to really start thinking about that offensive strategy that you were bringing up.
And we need people to start realizing that there is a fourth party, and that's us. It's us, the people, not the government. Because everything that we are voting for and wanting should be what's happening or what our elected officials are doing. But like you mentioned earlier, we have a few examples of not representing their party properly, and that's what needs to change.
Yeah, the fourth branch of the people of actually holding leaders accountable. And that's what I loved about what's going on with the censoring of all these Republicans that voted for Trump. I mean, voted to impeach Trump. We're holding our leaders accountable. I think that needs to be taken to, we need to take it to them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
kind of,
yeah. See you thinking, Poe. What you thinking?
Is this just straight politics or
whatever you want? Whatever you want.
Or is there a religious tone to it too?
We can have a religious tone. That's an American idea.
It's part of the First Amendment, so go for it.
Feeling like my First Amendment's under attack.
Oh, go for it. This is a place for ideas, man.
I listen. I wonder if there's a way to come together with the Democrats. I feel like there are Democrats who I don't see Democrats as the enemy.
Hmm.
I see them as good people that have been lied to.
I think that's
Right.
that's a fair statement.
Right.
I think that's a fair statement.
And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there are good people on both sides, and I think there are bad people on both sides.
Hey, that's something Trump said, so you better watch it.
Oh man, I miss him already. And
All right.
yeah,
I think
and
you're right though. They're I think
because
yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because from a religious standpoint, like that to me is more important than the political side, right?
Mhm.
Because when I study, like, how religious can I go? Are we good?
Yeah,
Like,
you're
As
good.
religious as you want.
First
Okay,
Amendment.
okay.
We don't
so-
sacrifice. We don't sacrifice things, but go
Yeah,
for it.
just don't sacrifice anything on the podcast.
I like bring up a puppy with an AR. Just kidding. Anyway, so I've been studying the last days, right? And if you look at the book of Revelation, it mentions three beasts in there. One beast is the dragon that has seven heads with horns, right?
Mhm.
And then there's another beast, the Leviathan, that comes out of the sea. But the interesting part about this beast, it also has seven heads. It has seven heads, but the horns are not on the head. Sorry, the crowns are not on the head. It's on the horns, right?
Okay.
To represent that it could be nations that will use brute strength to take over, right? So it could be armies. Is one interpretation, and then there's another beast that is talked about in Book of Revelation. It's a lamb, right? But when you think about a lamb, who do you think about?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. But that's not the beast. That's not the lamb that John the Revelator is talking about. It's a lamb that has horns. The idea of the symbolic part of it is that there's going to be a beast that comes across good but is actually evil, right? And this beast is actually going to deceive, is the key word, many people. And I feel like, I'm not saying that media is that beast, but it sure feels that way. Right? Where they deceive good people. And so when I think of strategy, I'm not just thinking about strategy on a political side, but a spiritual strategy. How can people know that they're being deceived by that third beast? Because I see the psychological side and what Jordan Peterson says and Scott Adams, and I see what they're saying. But on a spiritual standpoint, how do you know that they're not being lied to? How do you know that you're not in bed with the lamb with horns? See, I think about that. That's why I come up with the idea that conservatives, I'm also concerned about them as
Yeah,
well.
because
What
they
if
could basically be that lamb with horns.
right? And there might be people that seem like conservatives, but really they're not.
Mm-hmm.
How can we discern that, let alone overcome it?
Yeah, that's a good point. In that sense, I really like that idea of how do we come together and be truly united? Because I love the discourse. Some of the best conversations I have are with people in the military that are super liberal and super Democrat. But they respect, we have this mutual respect as we talk for these different ideas. And that's a healthy opportunity, because I think that's conservatives, the beauty behind conservatism is they want to conserve what's working, conserve the old ways, conserve these ideas. But sometimes those ideas aren't always the best idea, and that's where the liberal change and hope and that ideology comes into play, to where and it's just this polarizing effect that I think is a healthy balance. It's almost harmonizing. And if we can really find a way to work with the Democrats and find those people that are really reasonable, Because like you said, they're reasonable and good people on both sides. And it's just a matter of how do we open up that dialogue to
Yeah, how do we get into that echo chamber? See, news of the left gets to the right, but news of the right does not get to the left side. They have that airtight, right? And then however you get there, and Jordan Peterson even also mentioned that liberals are important too, right?
Yeah, Michael Jordan said that Republicans buy shoes too.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
I see where you're going though, but
yeah, I just wonder if if the only way that we can beat this is through love.
Agreed.
I wonder if that's really the overreaching and it's the only way is that you love you love your enemies, you pray for those that despitefully use you. And if you just go back to those principles, is that might be the best way to do it, but maybe not. I don't know.
That's why I hate the two-party system, is because they're so polarizing that that's the opposite of what they're wanting. They want us to continue with that hate so we don't come to agreements because it doesn't fit the agenda, it doesn't fit the next paycheck. That's why I hate that two-party system, is for that reason.
Yeah. And imagine a Democrat coming out just saying, dude, I think Republicans have a good point. I think Republicans are good, loving people.
And that's like, Tulsi Gabbard.
That would be, yeah, I was going to say Tulsi Gabbard's about the only one.
And she was destroyed by her own party because she did do that.
Yeah.
She's a Russian spy, okay? Come on.
Freaking illusion. Their obsession with Russia, man. It's
they don't have Chinese girlfriends and
Isn't that sad though? Someone inside their own party, like Joe Rogan said, she literally was the best candidate for their presidential nomination. But they attacked her and threw her under the bus so that way someone like Biden could get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like that love sentiment, and I think that's a good way to kind of end the conversation, in all honesty, because I think that's really the only way out of something like this, is finding mutual respect and mutual admiration for each other. So, well, awesome. Thanks, Poe, for participating in this amazing conversation.
I hope it was useful. Sorry, listeners, if it wasn't, but I enjoyed myself. So
that's all good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Real quick, you can follow us at we actually have a website up now. It's YoungRepubs.com. We're going to be posting some articles and other content there besides just the podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and locals at The Young Repubs, and on Facebook at The Young Republicans. And then find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts, at The Young Repubs. So unless you guys have anything else,
peace. Just remember, you matter like I matter.
Okay.
That's for all of you listeners. You all matter.
Yes. And please let us know too what you think. Send us a message, a DM. Just connect with us. We'd love to have more people involved in these conversations. So
absolutely.
Cool. All right. Peace out.